Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into something a bit controversial today?
Always up for a good debate.
Well, let's see if this sparks one. It's an article I came across on LinkedIn. The title is Pretty Attention Grabbing. There is no high-performing organization with snowflakes.
Okay, that's definitely provocative. Who's the author making this claim?
It's Sylvia Olah. She's got quite a background, actually. Talent management, organizational psychology. Even written a couple of books on the subject.
So someone who knows a thing or two about workplaces then. What's the core of her argument?
She's basically connecting the dots between parenting styles, the kind of employees companies are hiring these days, and ultimately how well those companies are actually performing.
So is this about the whole snowflake stereotype we hear so much about?
Yeah, she's using that term snowflake. But to be specific, she's talking about workers who are overly sensitive, can't handle criticism, feel entitled. And she's saying this mindset is a direct result of how they were brought up.
So kind of blaming the parents for creating a workforce that can't deal with a high-pressure environment.
That's the gist of it. And she goes even further to say companies are failing to see this connection. They're struggling to maintain high standards because of it.
So it's not just a generational thing. She's pointing at a bigger problem?
Right. She even brings up how Gen Z employees are being fired at higher rates because they can't handle basic professional expectations.
Wow, now that's a pretty strong statement.
Yep.
Is she just making these claims, or does she have anything to back them up?
Oh, she does. And some of the examples are pretty startling. She talks about employees who try to justify unfinished work by bringing up childhood trauma.
Really? Like what kind of drama?
She mentions one case where an employee used something like their dad yelling at them once as a reason for not completing a task.
Huh, so avoiding accountability by playing the victim card.
That's exactly what Ola is getting at. She
Yeah.
believes this victimhood mentality is becoming so common that it's really hurting companies.
In what way?
It makes giving feedback almost impossible. Managing conflict becomes a minefield. And even holding employees to basic standards becomes a huge challenge.
So you're saying she sees this as a real threat to how businesses function?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
She believes it's hindering their ability to innovate, improve, and stay competitive.
That's a pretty serious claim. So where does she think all of this started? Is it solely the parents' fault?
Well, while she definitely points to parenting as a huge factor, she acknowledges there are other societal things going on too. But her main argument is that how kids are being raised these days, it's creating a workforce that's just not ready for the real world.
That's interesting because we do hear a lot about how parenting styles have changed over the years,
Yeah.
more focus on protecting kids from discomfort and failure.
And that's exactly what Ola is saying. It sets them up for a rude awakening when they enter a workplace where those things are part of everyday life.
I can see how that disconnect could lead to a lot of problems.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting because Ola doesn't just complain. She offers some concrete advice for how companies can navigate this new reality.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's her take on dealing with this so-called snowflake generation?
Well, brace yourself because she doesn't advocate for coddling or lowering expectations. In fact, she thinks that's making things worse.
Really? So what does she suggest companies do differently?
Her advice is actually pretty straightforward. Focus on performance, set clear boundaries, high expectations, and no more tiptoeing around accountability.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty radical departure from the whole employee-centric approach that's become so popular.
It is, and it's definitely going to ruffle some feathers.
Right.
But before we dive into the specifics of her recommendations, I think it's important to understand what she sees as the key traits of a high-performing individual, because she draws a very clear contrast between that and the snowflake mentality.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's unpack those characteristics then and see how they fit into this whole picture.
That's exactly where we're headed next.
All right, so let's get into it. What does Ola say makes these high performers tick? What sets them apart from the snowflake crowd?
She describes them as self-reliant,
Mm.
really resilient. And the big thing is they see feedback as a way to grow, not as a personal attack. They don't shy away from challenges. They actually embrace them.
Sounds a lot like that growth mindset concept we hear so much about.
Yeah.
It's interesting how she's linking that to success in a company setting. Does she give any examples of how this plays out in the real world?
Oh, definitely. She talks about how when there's conflict, these high performers, they don't get all offended or run straight to HR. They'll address the issue directly with whoever they're having the disagreement with.
That's pretty different from the whole conflict avoidant behavior she's talking about with the snowflakes. It's like they have completely opposite ways of dealing with people.
And Ola's point is that this difference has a huge impact on the whole company culture and how well the company actually performs.
Makes sense if you've got a bunch of people more worried about their own ego than working together.
Right. She's basically saying companies are so afraid of upsetting someone that they're afraid to give honest feedback, afraid to address problems, or even set goals that are actually ambitious.
And that's got to stifle any company's ability to, be innovative and competitive.
That's exactly her point.
Hmm.
And she doesn't hold back when it comes to telling companies what they need to do to change things.
So what's the solution? What does she want companies to actually do?
It boils down to this. Stop tiptoeing around and create a culture where performance is what really matters.
Meaning what specifically?
Clear boundaries, high expectations, and making it clear that people are going to be held accountable. No more sugarcoating or avoiding tough conversations.
That's quite a contrast to this whole employee-centric thing that's been so popular.
It is, and it's going to make some people uncomfortable. But it all comes back to what she said about parenting.
Right.
If you grow up getting constant praise no matter what you do, it's a huge shock when you get to a job where results actually matter.
That's a good point.
And
And maybe that explains why so many younger employees are quitting their jobs.
Olah thinks so. She says companies are losing talent because they're not equipped to deal with a generation that has a totally different set of expectations.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. And she goes even deeper. She says this isn't just a generational thing. It's a sign of a bigger shift in society where individual comfort and validation are valued more than hard work and accountability.
Makes you wonder how much companies should have to adapt to these changes in society.
Right. It's a tough question. And to be fair, Ola does acknowledge that companies can't completely ignore what their employees need and value. But she also says they have a responsibility to maintain certain standards, even if it means pushing back against some of these trends that she sees as going too far.
So finding that sweet spot between adapting and staying true to what works.
Exactly. And she believes that finding that balance is crucial, not just for companies to succeed, but for the whole economy.
Otherwise, things start to fall apart.
Right. She's basically warning that if we keep prioritizing sensitivity over substance, it's going to lead to less productivity, less innovation, and ultimately will be less competitive on a global scale.
That's a pretty dire prediction, but she doesn't leave us just hanging with doom and gloom, Ray.
Nope. She actually provides a roadmap for how companies can build a culture that's both demanding and supportive, where employees are challenged to grow, but also feel valued and respected.
I like the sound of that. Let's dig into those recommendations and see how we can apply them to our own workplaces.
That's exactly where we're headed next.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've talked about the problems and why Ola thinks they're happening, but she doesn't just leave us there. She actually offers some pretty concrete advice for companies.
That's what I'm interested in. What's her solution? How do companies actually fix this?
Well, she's not afraid to challenge some of the popular trends we've seen in HR lately, especially this whole idea of creating woke workplaces.
Woke workplaces. What does she mean by that? She's talking about this focus on being overly sensitive to individual needs and preferences, even if it means sacrificing performance and company goals.
You mean like bending over backwards to make everyone feel good, even if it hurts the company in the long run?
Exactly. She thinks it creates a culture where mediocrity is accepted and people feel entitled.
I can see how that would be a problem. So what's the alternative?
It all comes down to focusing on performance, setting clear boundaries, high expectations, and no more avoiding accountability.
So basically a reality check for both companies and employees.
Pretty much. She believes companies have lost sight of their main purpose, which is to get results, not to cater to everyone's feelings.
That's a pretty bold statement, especially with all the talk about employee well-being and creating a safe space in the workplace.
It is. But Ola argues that true psychological safety comes from knowing what's expected of you, having the opportunity to grow and develop your skills, and being recognized for your actual contributions.
So it's about being challenged and supported, but not coddled or protected from the real world.
Exactly. It's that kind of environment that builds resilience and accountability and creates a sense of shared purpose, which are all crucial for a high-performing team.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what about the practical stuff? What do companies actually need to do to make this happen?
Communication is key. She says companies need to be crystal clear about their values, what they expect from their employees, and what happens if those expectations aren't met.
Seems pretty basic, but you're saying a lot of companies are messing this up.
She thinks so. They're too afraid to have difficult conversations, to set clear boundaries, and to actually hold people accountable for their actions.
And she blames this on those woke HR policies we were talking about.
Exactly. She says these policies, even though they might have good intentions, have created an environment where managers are terrified to give honest feedback or address performance issues because they're so worried about being accused of discrimination or something like that.
So trying to be too inclusive is actually backfiring and making things worse.
That's what she's arguing. And it's a really interesting point. She's saying companies need to stop walking on eggshells and focus on what really matters,
Huh.
getting results and creating value.
It sounds like she's calling for a pretty big shift in how we think about work, both for companies and for employees.
She is. And she believes this shift is absolutely necessary if we want to create a more productive, more innovative, and ultimately more fulfilling work experience for everyone.
Well, she's definitely given us a lot to chew on. Whether you agree with her or not, it's a conversation we need to have. And maybe it's time to take a hard look at how we're approaching work and what we can do to create a better future for everyone involved.
Couldn't agree more. So what resonated with you most from this deep dive? Let us know your thoughts on social media. We always love hearing from you. Thanks for joining us.